Hey friends and family, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and I hope you've been enjoying the last week or so's worth of videos that were influenced or inspired by the Atea deck that I received from Marco Benedetti. Once I showcased the deck and then I compared it with two other publications of the deck, I was inspired to do even more videos. And so I compared the meanings of the Atea cards with the Rider-Waite-Smith cards, right? So I compared it to a facsimile deck of 1910. And then I further had been inspired to pull out the Thoth deck that I have. Oh my God, did hell freeze over? I actually pulled out the Thoth deck and I compared the Atea to the Thoth to see what, if any, meanings they had in common. And both the Rider-Waite-Smith decks and the Thoth deck by Aleister Crowley shared similarities and meanings to several, not just one or two, but several cards from the Atea deck. So I thought that was very interesting. So by now I'm sure you've seen those videos. And if you haven't watched all of those videos, go back and check them out. Today's video is just getting on another topic. I'll probably get back on that at some point. But I just wanted to do something different, for myself. And as some of you know, that I have been kind of invested in some true crime cases where there's mystery. We like to all know what happened or what occurred, in some of these cases. Now, I've done readings on, I did reading on Cavalcante back when he escaped from prison. That reading was very uncanny, how that turned out. I've done readings on, the Idaho students, Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, and Zena. I've done a few on them. I've done Sebastian Rogers, like where should we be looking for facts, on that case. And many, almost every reading I've done for Sebastian, who still hasn't been found, the information that I received with the cards had nothing to do with the social media, the people who are following that case. My interpretation is kind of unpopular because I wasn't seeing what everyone else was seeing. So I think that's interesting. We still yet don't know, what happened to poor Sebastian. And I also did a few readings on Riley Strain. I apologize. It's not because I'm disrespectful. It's because I'm not as sharp as I used to be. And I don't always remember things really clearly. But I did a few videos on him, and those results were uncanny. And as a result of trying to be informed and trying to just know what is factually known, which is hard in all these cases because there are so many rumors out there that are circulating, and there's such a vacuum of real information that it's really hard to do readings when you're basing the information on what you believe to be the truth. But the cards will reveal information despite because when I do the reading, I ask the universe to, even if I have some of the facts wrong, at least to provide me with the information that will help with the case or whatever. So even if there's some facts that we got wrong, I think, the way I work it when I approach the universe for answers, I ask them to account for that. And I ask the universe to account for that. Okay, at any rate, in watching some of these YouTube channels who deal with true crime, some of them do delve into trying to contact the individuals who passed on, or assuming that the individual passed on, they'll try to contact their essence to get information. Now, all of them seem to rely on spirit boxes, and I get so frustrated by that because I guess they're not inclined to ask a reader to do a reading for them, like to go on their show and do a reading, or why they don't just pull out a tarot deck on their own, to try their hand at it. Because after all, these spirit boxes, sometimes I listen really hard and I never hear what they hear, no matter how many times they slow it down or refine it or clean it up. To me, it always still sounds like it doesn't sound like any kind of language. And I don't understand why they insist on using that when we have a few other methods that will be so much more helpful. Now, I can understand somebody being intimidated and say, well, I'm not a tarot reader. I don't know how to interpret the cards. But the cards, they have pictures on them. They have numbers on them. Even if you're not a proficient tarot reader, if you approach the universe and you say, to the best of my understanding, please deliver a message through me using these cards, that would be valid, right? I mean, if you want to learn how to read the cards, it takes years to be proficient. It takes years. It takes years, to reach a level of, feeling really confident in making, connections to a situation, and no matter what pops up, because sometimes, for a fact that, and even to this day, sometimes with me, sometimes cards pop up and I'm like, I scratch my head. I'm trying to make, sense of it, but eventually you can make sense of it because there's always a connection. There's always a connection to a situation. You just have to be disciplined enough to find it, and that's where the years of experience comes in. Okay, I went off on a tangent, but I'm going to do a few examples of how the tarot may be used to receive a message from someone who has passed on. Now, I use these, I do this with my family when I want to, when I'm thinking of my parents, or one of my grandparents, or, when I want to connect with, or get an answer from someone, or I need consolation, or I miss you so much kind of thing, and just give me a word that everything's good, I'll pull out the cards for that. And I think it's valid to use the cards for some of these true crime cases instead of the gibberish that you get on one of those spirit box machines, to ask, to receive information at the level that we understand the cards. Now, I will use the Idaho Students as today's example, because that case, I seem to be most invested in that case. Oh, I care about young Sebastian Rogers very much. I care what happens to him, but after all, we don't know if he's deceased, right? And I don't want to put out any vibe assuming he is deceased, because I don't want to bring that about in case he isn't. You see what I'm saying? But we know that the 4 young people in Idaho are deceased for sure. Now, whenever I do a reading trying to get information from someone who has passed on, I always approach the universe with this premise. Maybe the person has been reincarnated. Maybe there's parallel universes, and my theory that I shared with you a few videos ago, maybe the person is already in another parallel universe, completely whole and well, and has no idea what happened to them in this realm. Maybe they thought it was just a bad dream, and when they woke up or snapped out of it in that realm, they said, hey, you wouldn't believe this crazy dream I had. It was so scary, right? So there may be times when it's absolutely impossible, and we shouldn't think that we have access to whoever we want. I don't. So in those cases, and usually always when I preface a question where I'm trying to get information from the essence of someone who has passed on, I'll ask the universe if the person is not available, or the essence of the person is not available. Please, dear universe, please speak on their behalf and tell me what I need to know, or what you feel I need to know, because the universe knows the secrets of itself. And that way, I think it's an important distinction when you go into reading for information from someone who has passed on, to approach it in that way. I've never learned it, from anybody. Nobody told me that that was the way to do it, but it is the way that I approach communication with anyone who has passed on. Now, I'm going to ask a question about the young people in Idaho 4, and my question is, can they, any of them, I ask the essence of all of them, any of them, through the universe, to validate whether or not the person who has been arrested and is the suspect, to validate whether or not that is the individual who is responsible for their deaths, right? Now, it may be a little harder to do with cards because it's not like there's a card that says yes, no, right? There's not going to be a card that says yes, no. But we can ascertain, if we say, I'm going to pull one card, and you can have an understanding with the universe that yes is even and no is odd, okay? Or you can say a positive card, a card that you see as a positive will affirm that the individual who has been arrested is the correct individual. But I think doing this to keep it simple for people who might want to use a method to communicate with someone in another realm with yes/no questions, to just use the even/odd number system, because anybody can do that, and you don't have to be a proficient tarot reader, and there's no reason to be intimidated. I have not removed the higher order cards. However, they do have numbers, and those numbers are either even or odd, with the exception of the Fool card. So I've concentrated and meditated on this long enough off camera so that I don't feel as though I have to go back and do it. But I'm asking the universe for the information, either directly from the essence of the individuals, or if the universe will speak on their behalf. Do we have the right person? Has the right person been apprehended? Is the person who is responsible for their murders the person who is in custody? So let me flip the camera. Alrighty then. So I just do a few online shuffles. So you know that it's not a stage reading. And we're asking the essence of the universe or the individuals themselves, if they are available, to affirm or deny that the individual who is responsible for their murders is the person who has been apprehended. 20. Isn't that an interesting card for a picture? So yes, that person, the answer to the question based on the parameters that I put in, even numbers would be yes. And isn't this interesting? Because the image we have, we don't have 4 individuals, but we have 3 individuals who are rising from death. So there's a group of people who have arisen. So, not only are we getting affirmation that the individual is the correct person, we're also getting an affirmation that they're moving on, or they're in an okay place. Even if they're able to communicate, they're in an okay place. And maybe one of them has already been reborn or something. There's only 3 here, right? So this is something that anyone can do. This is, nobody has to be intimidated. Another method which can be used instead of the abrasive sounds of the spirit box is to use spirit dice. Now, what I did was and I'll show you how I store them. I had a boggle game that I played with my children when they were little, and I saved it. I still had the game. And it occurred to me that the dice would be really great to use for divination. And I have had some amazing results with these dice. Now, the boggle game had 16, and I just keep them encased in this container that I got a ballpoint pen from, and I keep them nice and safe. But when I use the dice, I usually use this pretty box, I think that is, or whatever this thing is, that was, I think you made for using for charms, divining with charms, or divining with spirit dice. Now, I usually take the dice and put them in a sack that's big enough for them to, let me do it this way. That's big enough for them to move around a little bit. And once again, I'll ask a yes/no question. And I'll use the same question, right? I'll do the same question. Is the person who has been arrested, is the suspect we have in custody, the person responsible for the murders of the 4 young people in Idaho, Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan? Now, the only word we're looking for is yes or no. So, of course, we have neither. Isn't that interesting? We have QU. We have no Y. Wow, isn't that something? The only letter we have that could be in part of yes or no is the E. So, in this case, since we don't have a clear-cut yes or no, I would get a tablet and a pen, and I would write all the possible words, 3 letters or more. That's how I deal with, that's the understanding I have going into this, 3 letters or more. To look for whatever clues a collection of words might bring. So let me go off camera and you take a good look here at some of these letters. We have a QU, which is very rare. We have D, which we don't see much of. We have A, E, I, A-E-I. We have 2 A's, 1 I, 1 E. I'm just trying to show you so that if you want to write them down. Okay, I'll give you the letters so that you can do it too. All right? I, A, V, H, Q, U, W, D, P, E, B, A, C, R, T, D, H. That's all. That's 16. So you write them down. I, A, V, H, Q, U, W, B, A, C, D, P, E, R, T, D, H. You may get some words that I didn't get, okay? So let's go. I'm going off camera. I'm going to make a list of all the words. You do the same thing. And then we can, when I turn the camera back on, I'll show you the words that I came up with and what they might spell out, hopefully to indicate why we didn't get yes or no. Okay, so I gave myself about 15 minutes, just to really get the words that immediately popped out at me. And I'm doing it to show you how I would do it, because some of what I said, isn't just exactly how I would do it. And by doing the process, it reminds me of like how I do it, I go about it. Now, I hope you made a list of words. I have a list of probably a few dozen words, right? Now, what I do when I do this process is I try to make sentences, or I try to connect related words. Now I said that I only go for 3 words that are 3 letters or more. However, I failed to mention that I do look for pronouns. And in this group of letters that we have I, we, he. Okay, we have an article, the, and what is what? Well, we had the word what too. Now it's a 4-letter word, but we had, it was interesting that we had I, we, he. That's interesting. And we had a few sentences that could be created. I'll go through the related words. Words that were related: death and died, wept and cried, quart and quad. Okay. And then there were other words that weren't related. We have, I'll just tell you all the words I came up with in that 10-minute period or 15-minute period. Hard, heart, heard, teach, parade, head, bite, breath. Related words, bitch and crap. Maybe one of them, maybe they cursed. Hid, hide, dear, dated. The few sentences I came up with. He had a view. He watched. He drive a white car. That's interesting. It wasn't like he drove, but he drive a white car. Pride, wiped, hard-headed, bride, patch, brew, thread, read, or read, bread, batch, and drew. So some of the words are just words that I can't put in a sentence. You know, the process that I use, and I failed to mention before doing this, is that I construct sentences. I use the words to construct a sentence, you know. And the ones that really hit for me could have been he hid, you know, he hid. He drive a white car. He watched. He had a view. Yeah, you know, so those are clues. Now it doesn't spell out Brian Koberger did this, you know, unfortunately. You know, I was looking for Brian. It had B-R-I-A and no N. I know he spells his name with a Y, but I would have even accepted B-R-I-I-A-N. I would have accepted that because maybe they didn't know how to spell his name, you know. But there are a few things that sort of validate what we know about him. They may never have seen him before. They may not have ever seen him before, but maybe, you know, they hear through the grapevine up there that he had a white car. We died. We wept. We cried. I died. I wept. I cried. Teach. It could be he teach. Breath. You know. Heart could have been affected. Dear and dated, which I presume was Ethan and Zaina, unless one of them dated him, but I doubt it. I don't think there's any evidence of that. Pride, you know, it's possible pride was involved. Wipe and wiped. So those are the words I came up with. So there are a few compelling combinations of words that can suggest that there is a connection between who did this and him, the person that's in custody. The most valuable one, I think, is, you know, drive white car, or he drive white car, which is pretty compelling. But I mean, even if this is a flawed system, you got to admit that it's a whole lot better than you know, even if you get a random word like doorway, you know, even if like a strange word pops up in one of those sessions with the sound machines, it never makes any more sense than anything that we just did here. So I just thought I'd throw that out there, you know, especially if by any chance some of you are YouTube channel people who do true crime. You know, instead of using that awful machine, you know, these are two other options that you might consider for yourselves, which are really easy and require no special skill at all. You know, remember, even, odd, yes and no. Have that as your intent going into the thing, and then spirit dice, and see what kind of sentences. You look for sentences. You look for related words like death and died, wept and cried, court and quad. You know, there was 4 of them, right? You look for pronouns, I, we, he, they, us, whatever shows up. And then you combine to make a sentence, you know, that would validate or not, you know. Now, the only things that we didn't see in here were yes and no. You know, that would have been very convenient if the word yes popped up. Yes, it was him, or no. But maybe they don't know if it was him or not. Maybe all they know are the clues they gave us. He hid. He watched. He drive white car. He drive car. White car. Right? So it's possible maybe they didn't see him well enough to know if it was him. Or maybe they just didn't know his name. So me telling them it was Brian Koberger, they're like, well, who's he? Right? So we look for the clues that are given to us. And that's what I love using spirit dice. I think I've told you about the most, this was actually a compelling experience here too. I think this is pretty close to being very satisfying in finding out, some clues, and validation. But I had asked, I don't know if I mentioned this before I did all this, but I had, asked for my mom to validate that she had been present when we had the baby during a visit, and for validation of her visit. And there were lots of words that popped up, but the only one I had to see to know it validated that she was present was the word Bluey. Bluey, because that's what we were watching on TV. And my mother would have loved Bluey. My mom was all about Bluey, even though she died before Bluey came out and was a thing. So I hope this was insightful and interesting for you. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be kind, and do no harm.